The rain fell in sheets, as if the whole sky had turned against me. I stood on the porch of the Back Bay townhouse, suitcase in hand, rainwater dripping from my coat. Through the locked glass door, my son Nathan's voice crackled over the intercom. Calm, cold, and final. "You should just sign it, Mother. It's just paperwork." Just paperwork. That's what he called the $59 million stock portfolio my husband Robert left behind when he died. Whitfield Maritime and Logistics, the Whitfield Mariners Foundation, the house, all of it built on a lifetime of discipline and sacrifice. My son wanted me to sign it all away overnight. I looked up at the second-floor window. A shadow moved behind the curtain. Caroline, my daughter-in-law. Her arm draped over Nathan's shoulder, her head tilted as if the matter was already settled. The light from their room cast a glow on the wall of rain that separated us. I heard her voice, just barely. The same sweet tone I had once mistaken for family. "She's being so stubborn. Nathan, you have to protect what's yours." A crack of lightning split the sky. I pressed my palm against the cold door, feeling the vibration as the deadbolt clicked shut from within. The gate code was changed. My key was useless. My own home had become someone else's fortress. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply whispered, "It's still mine, Nathan. You just don't know how yet." The stone walkway gleamed in the storm as I walked toward my car. My reflection blurred in every puddle. A woman in her 60s, soaked but unbroken. People like to believe a betrayal happens all at once. The truth is, it happens the moment you stop paying attention. The brass keys on my keychain caught the light as I opened the car door. Robert's coastal keys. An anchor, a compass rose, a single seagull. "For when the tide turns," he had said. I didn't understand then. I understood now. As I drove away, the rain chased the beat of my heart against the windshield. Behind me, the house shrank until it vanished into the night. Ahead, the faint sweep of the Castle Hill light blinked through the salt-laced fog. Gullhaven Point, the rocky cape and cedar-shingled estate where we'd built our sanctuary. That night, they thought they'd ended my story. But I had learned from Robert, an ending is just a beginning in disguise. Before dawn, I would be standing in the sea house at Gullhaven, the coastal keys nested in my palm, ready for what came next. Nathan and Caroline believed they had stripped me of everything. They didn't understand trust law, they didn't understand legacy, and they didn't understand the kind of woman Robert had chosen. Tomorrow, they would come for the coastal estate, bold, confident, and greedy, and when they did, they would see who was standing beside me. Their faces would pale even before the truth left my lips, because Robert left me more than money. He left me a plan. The morning of Robert's funeral, Providence was gray and windless, the kind of silence that hangs in the air before a storm. Black umbrellas lined the path into Swan Point Cemetery, and the press cameras flashed as if grief needed proof. My son, Nathan, walked ahead of me, his wife on his arm. Caroline's makeup wasn't even smudged as she pressed a tissue to her cheek. The New England papers called them the grieving heirs. Robert Whitfield had built a coastal shipping and warehouse line from nothing, and yet the only thing he truly owned was his word. He used to tell me, "A legacy isn't something you leave behind, it's something you protect." Standing by his grave, I finally understood what he meant. The pastor's voice faded on the wind. I focused on the photograph on the casket, a man with kind eyes and a mind that could see 10 moves ahead. As the final hymn ended, I noticed Adrian Mercer, Robert's longtime attorney and legal partner, waiting under an elm tree. He wasn't looking at the casket. He was watching Nathan. Caroline waved at a reporter, her hand resting delicately on Nathan's chest. "Smile, darling. Your father would want to see strength." The cameras clicked. She knew which side of the lens her future was on. I walked over to Adrian. His overcoat was damp, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he handed me a small beige envelope sealed with Robert's script. On the front, in the ink only my husband used, were 5 words. "For your eyes only, L." Robert was worried Nathan might overstep, Adrian said quietly. He mentioned the possibility of a premature stock transfer without consent. He told me, "If anything happens, give this to her." My fingers tightened around the envelope. "And you think he knew this would happen?" Adrian's gaze drifted to Nathan and Caroline, who were posing for the press near the limousine. Robert always knew when the tide was about to turn. He just didn't know how soon. Behind him, Tomas Alvarez, our groundskeeper of over 20 years, stood silently near the gates. His arms were crossed over his chest, his head bowed. When our eyes met, he gave a short, respectful nod, the gesture of a soldier, not a servant. After everyone had gone, I stayed. The wind picked up, bending the white roses laid across the casket. I knelt and whispered, "If the tide turns, follow the light." They were the last words Robert said to me before the surgery, from which he never returned. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket. The paper was warm, almost alive. Inside it, I could feel the precision with which Robert built a bridge or closed a deal. He'd left me something, but I wasn't ready to open it. Not yet. As the limousine pulled away, I watched Nathan lean toward Caroline. She smiled at something he said, her diamond earrings flashing through the window. This was the same woman who had once called me mother. I turned toward my waiting car and whispered, "You were right, my love. Empires don't collapse from the outside. They crumble from within." On the drive home, Providence blurred past the rain-streaked glass. Every streetlight flickered like a silent warning. Something had shifted. The money, the company, even the estate. It was all part of a larger plan I couldn't yet see. When I got home, I placed the envelope on my desk, but I didn't open it. I just sat there, staring at it, until the last of the light was gone. Robert had built shipping lines and warehouses, yes, but his greatest achievement wasn't made of steel or profit. It was the way he taught me to listen, to the silences, to the small details, to the danger that hid behind polite smiles. That night, I heard the quiet lap of waves against the dock behind the house. It reminded me of something he'd said when he was drafting his will. "The light will guide the one who is worthy." I didn't know what he meant yet, but I would soon. 5 days after the funeral, I sat in the offices of Mercer & Co., 32nd floor, Boston's financial district, watching streaks of rain slide down the glass walls. The city below looked smaller from up here, as if distance could make betrayal more palatable. Across the table, Nathan tapped his fingers impatiently, while Caroline adjusted a pearl earring, smiling at the paralegals who offered coffee. Adrian cleared his throat. "As the executor of Robert Whitfield's estate, I will now commence the reading of his final will and testament." His voice was even, professional, the kind that could calm a storm or start one. A portrait of Robert hung on the wall behind him, eyes looking straight ahead as if he were still watching. Adrian unfolded the document. "To my beloved wife, Eleanor Whitfield, I leave our home. Full ownership of company stock, accounts, and assets are to be held within the Whitfield Mariners Foundation, which includes the coastal estate at Gullhaven Point." The room was silent, save for the hum of the rain. Caroline's smile froze. Nathan blinked, disbelief flickering across his face. "What?" My son's voice cracked. "He promised I would take over the company. He said it was my time to lead." Adrian continued reading. "To my son, Nathan Whitfield, I leave my personal collection of marine chronometers and my gratitude. I hope that time will teach you what pride cannot." Nathan pushed his chair back. "This is insane. He was sick, confused. He couldn't have left her everything." Caroline leaned forward, her voice sugary but trembling. "Adrian, there must be a mistake. Perhaps he forgot to add a transfer clause for Nathan's role." Adrian didn't answer. He opened a file and tapped his tablet. A video began to play on the wall-mounted screen. Robert's face appeared, tired but alive, filmed just weeks before he died. His voice filled the room like the tide returning to shore. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone," he said. "Nathan, I love you, son, but a legacy belongs to the one who builds it, not the one who demands it. The world tests integrity the way the sea tests a cliff, with time." Caroline's face was ashen. Nathan stood frozen. The faint sound of waves came from the background of the recording. Robert gave a weak smile. "Elle, if the tide turns, you'll know where to find the rest of my words, where the waves meet the cliffs." The screen faded to black. The silence filled every corner of the room. I let out a slow breath. My hands remained in my lap, calm, though my heart was pounding. Robert was always deliberate. If he mentioned the cliffs, he meant Gullhaven Point. Nathan's voice broke the stillness. "This isn't over. I'll sue. You can't keep it all, Mother." I turned to him, meeting his eyes for the first time all day. "Your father didn't build an empire for greed, Nathan. He built it to survive greed." He slammed his hand on the table. "You've always controlled everything. Me, him, and now this." Caroline reached out, feigning comfort. "We'll sort this out, darling. Don't you worry." Adrian placed the original document back in its folder. "The will is clear. Everything remains as written, and the words of Mr. Robert Whitfield carry the full weight of the law." Outside, thunder rolled over the city. I stood, put on my coat, and took one last look at the portrait behind Adrian's desk. Robert's eyes seemed alive, steady, and full of warning. As we were leaving, Caroline whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "He must have been confused. Men like him always get sentimental at the end." I paused in the doorway and turned slightly. "No, men like him just finally say what they've always meant." Nathan stormed past me, his shoes slapping against the marble floor. Caroline followed, her perfume sharp in the air. I waited until the elevator doors closed before I looked back at Adrian. He gave a single, subtle nod. "There's more to this, isn't there?" I asked. He offered a faint smile. "Robert never did anything by halves. You'll find out soon enough." As I stepped outside, the rain had stopped, but the Boston sidewalks were still gleaming under the gray light. I looked toward the eastern horizon, where the sky met the sea. Somewhere out there at the cliffs of Gullhaven Point, my husband had hidden his next move, and I intended to find it. The night after the will reading, Nathan and Caroline invited me to dinner at their Beacon Hill brownstone. It was to honor Robert, they said. I knew better. Manipulation rarely arrives unannounced. It wears the cloak of love. Their house, our house, smelled of polished marble and new money. Caroline had set the table with perfect symmetry. White plates, crystal glasses, candles that burned too brightly. She greeted me with a practiced warmth that never reached her eyes. "Elle, I'm so glad you came. We've missed you at the house." "The house?" "My house." I smiled softly. "I'm sure you have." Nathan poured wine into my glass without asking. "Mother, I just want us to be amicable. Dad wouldn't have wanted this tension." I nodded slowly. "Your father wanted truth more than peace, Nathan. He believed peace built on a lie could never last." Caroline gave a little laugh, patting his arm. "You two are so alike, so serious. Come now, let's talk about what's best for the family." She slid a file across the table toward me. Inside were transfer documents. "Our legal team drafted something simple," she said, her tone light, almost casual. "You would still have access to the foundation. It's just easier if Nathan holds the assets directly for operational purposes." I ran my fingertips along the edge of the paper. "Operational purposes," I repeated. "That's what people say when they want control without responsibility." Caroline's smile didn't falter. "Elle, this isn't about control. It's about unity, family unity. You've been through so much. Let Nathan handle the stress now." Her voice was honey, but her eyes were ice. I took a sip of wine, watching the candlelight flicker through the glass. Something metallic caught my eye, the glint of a tiny lens, faint but unmistakable. Her phone was propped up just enough to record the table. So this was their plan. Record my words, twist them, build the incompetent narrative. Robert had warned me about this. Never fight a liar on their terms. I set my glass down gently. "You're right, Caroline. I have been through a lot, enough to know that love and ownership aren't always the same thing." Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Mother, no one is taking anything from you." "No," I said softly. "Then why does every word tonight sound like a request for permission?" The room went still. Even the clock on the mantel seemed to hold its breath. Caroline's smile tightened. "You're misunderstanding. We just want what's fair." "Fair?" I said, leaning back. "It usually sounds different." Nathan rubbed his temples, his voice strained. "Mother, don't make this harder than it has to be. He wanted me to lead." I met his gaze, calm and steady. "He wanted you to earn it." He looked away. Caroline broke the silence, her voice sharp beneath the sweetness. "You can't hold on to everything forever. It's not sustainable." I stood, folded the papers neatly, and placed them back on the table. "Some things aren't meant to be signed away, dear." Caroline blinked, thrown by my composure. "So you're refusing?" I offered a faint smile. "I'm thinking." Her phone screen went dark, the tiny red recording light vanishing as I moved toward the door. I could feel her eyes on my back, calculating, greedy, certain she would soon win. Outside, the night air was cooler, crisp with the scent of rain. I could still hear their muffled voices behind the door. "She'll cave," Caroline was saying. "They always do." I looked up at the faint sweep of the Castle Hill light in the distance. It blinked once, steady and sure. Robert used to say, "When the light keeps blinking, it's not a warning, it's a guide." In that moment, I knew I wasn't trapped. I was being tested. Back in my car, I opened my phone and texted Adrian 3 words. "They've started early." Then I set the phone face down, started the engine, and whispered to myself, "Sweet unity always tastes like poison." The rain began again, soft but deliberate, tapping on the windshield like a countdown. I drove home, calm, alert, and certain. They thought I was cornered. They didn't realize the recording they set tonight would become tomorrow's evidence. Later that week, they stopped pretending. Nathan was at my Back Bay townhouse door just after noon, his car still running in the drive. His jaw was tight, his suit rumpled as if he hadn't slept. Caroline followed, carrying a sleek black portfolio. Her heels clicked with purpose on the marble floor. "Mother," Nathan began, trying for a calm he didn't possess, "we need to sort this out today." I gestured toward the living room. The house felt heavier with them in it. "Sort what out, exactly?" Caroline's voice was smooth, rehearsed. "The shares. Elle, things are getting complicated with the foundation and the taxes. You can't manage this on your own. Nathan can sign on as co-owner. It will make everything easier for everyone." She opened the portfolio on the coffee table, her manicured hand sliding a pen toward me. I didn't touch it. Nathan's voice hardened. "You're being unreasonable. Dad would have wanted this. He trusted me to carry on what he built." I kept my gaze on him. Gaze on. "Your father trusted integrity, Nathan. He never attached that to a name." He looked away, then back, anger rising in his voice. "Do you think you're the only one capable of running this family? You're getting older, Mother. The board is going to start questioning your competence. They already are." Caroline placed a gentle hand on his arm, a pantomime of soothing, but her eyes glittered with victory. "Nathan, don't raise your voice. She's just scared." "Scared?" The word landed like a blade wrapped in silk. I leaned forward slowly, my voice quiet but clear. "You think fear and wisdom look the same because you've never had either." Her smile faltered. "Elle, we're trying to help." "By forcing a signature?" I asked. Nathan slid the documents toward me again. "If you refuse, we'll have to prove you're legally unfit. It's not personal, it's business." I stared at the black ink waiting for my name. "Unfit?" I repeated. "How convenient." Caroline whispered, "If you just sign, this will all go away." I picked up the pen, clicked it open, and held it poised above the line. Nathan let out a breath, believing he had won. Caroline hit record on her phone again, hiding it beneath the portfolio. I began to write, but I deliberately marked the wrong line, scratching my initials where the witness was meant to sign. Then I looked up. "Oh, my mistake," I said softly. Nathan frowned. "That's not where—" I cut him off. You wanted proof that I understand what I'm signing. Here it is. I fully understand, and I refuse. The words landed harder than any storm. Caroline's eyes went wide. She realized too late that the recording on her phone had captured all of it, including that one sentence. Nathan slammed his hand on the table. You're going to regret this. I stood slowly, retracting the pen, and met his eyes. You're right about that. I will regret something, but it won't be this. He stared at me, his chest rising and falling quickly, confusion flickering beneath the rage. He didn't know yet that in a court of law the phrase "I fully understand" and "I refuse" is a declaration of mental competence, the very thing that would demolish their case before it began. Caroline broke the silence, her voice thin. You've made this ugly, Elle. No, I said calmly. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. I gathered the portfolio and held it out to her. Take this with you. It will save me the trouble of shredding it later. Nathan's jaw clenched. You won't be here much longer. I offered a faint smile. Then I should probably start packing. They left without another word. Through the window, I watched them argue by the car, Caroline gesturing sharply while Nathan looked defeated. The rain started again, tapping on the glass like the applause of ghosts. As they drove away, I opened my phone. A text from Adrian was waiting on the screen. Remember what Robert built? Evidence always comes before power. I let out a breath, steady. Evidence, I whispered. We have it now. Upstairs, a distant roll of thunder echoed. It sounded like the beginning of something. That night, the rain returned like an old enemy. I had driven into the city for a board meeting that never happened. Caroline had arranged it, then forgotten to tell me it was canceled. When I got home, the driveway lights were off and the house was silent. I pressed the gate remote. Nothing. The system beeped once, then denied access. I tried again, still locked out. When I got to the front porch, the electronic keypad was glowing faintly. The code I had used for years no longer worked. I entered it twice, then 3 times, each attempt ending with the same flat tone. Behind the door, I heard footsteps. Then Nathan's voice, cold and disembodied, came through the intercom system. Go back to your charities, Mother. You're making this harder than it needs to be. My fingers hovered over the keypad. You changed the codes. He didn't answer, but I could see the faint movement of a shadow through the glass. Caroline's. She spoke quietly, just enough for the microphone to pick it up. It's for your own good, Elle. You need rest. You're not thinking clearly. I stared at my reflection in the rain-streaked glass, tired, soaked, but not broken. I'm thinking very clearly, I said, more clearly than either of you imagine. The sound of the electronic deadbolt clicking into place. Access to my own home was gone. For a moment, I just stood there, listening to the rain fall on the stone steps. I thought of all the mornings I'd walked through that door, carrying their breakfast. All the nights Robert and I had built our future under this roof. And now my son stood on the other side, silent. But I didn't cry. I didn't knock again. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and touched the set of brass keys Robert had given me years ago, the coastal keys. Their cool brass surface caught the dim glow of the street lamp. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Adrian Mercer. We got what we needed. I smiled through the rain. The marine security system was still rolling. Every word, every denial, every cruel utterance was recorded and stored, not by them, but by Robert's system. His foresight had built more than wealth. He had built protection. I turned back to my car, opened the door, and paused one last time. The house stood behind me, dark and guarded like a fortress that had forgotten its queen. Let them believe they've won, I whispered. That's how justice gathers its evidence. The windshield blurred as I drove down the long drive. Through the salt mist, I could see the faint sweep of the Castle Hill light, its beam cutting through the dark clouds. It blinked once, twice, steady as a heartbeat. The same lighthouse Robert had loved. The same one where we'd once carved our initials into the railing. By the time I reached the bridge leading to the coast, the rain had softened, the road gleaming under my headlights. I rolled the window down just enough to feel the cold air on my face. The world smelled of salt and storm, a mix of endings and beginnings. I thought of Nathan, of how the man who had held my hand as a boy now stood beside a woman who measured love in ownership. It hurt, but pain is a teacher, and I had learned my lessons well. As I turned onto the narrow road to the cliffs, I could see the sea churning below, restless and alive. Somewhere out there was the truth Robert had left waiting. I whispered into the night. "You planned for this, didn't you?" The lighthouse beam flashed again, as if in reply. By the time I reached the gates of Gullhaven Point, my heart was calm. I wiped the fog from the window and whispered, "You locked me out, Nathan, but I still have the key." Then I pressed the coastal key, the one shaped like an anchor, into the old iron lock, and the gates of Gullhaven Point swung open as if they had been waiting for me all along. Gullhaven Point greeted me with the sound of wind and sea crashing against stone. The gates closed behind me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. The sweep of the Castle Hill light cut across the sky in steady rhythmic beats. The same kind of rhythm Robert once said reminded him of breathing. Steady, unbroken, alive. The house had stood unchanged for years, weathered by ivy and salt air. When I pushed the heavy oak door open, dust motes danced in the moonlight like a fine mist. It smelled of cedar, ocean, and memory. "Tomas," I called out softly. From the kitchen doorway, a familiar voice answered, "Mrs. Whitfield." Tomas Alvarez, the groundskeeper for over 2 decades, stepped out carrying a lantern. His hair had gone gray, but his eyes held the same quiet strength Robert had always admired. "I thought you might be coming. You knew." He nodded and reached into his coat. "Mr. Whitfield left this for you." It was a sealed envelope, thick and worn at the edges, with Robert's script on the front. "For L, should they turn against you." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a folded letter and a smaller stamped envelope from the Whitfield Mariners Foundation. The letter smelled faintly of the sea, the ink slightly blurred, as if a tear had once touched it. "My love," it began, "if you are reading this, it means Forsyte has done what love could not, protect you." I sank into the armchair by the old stone fireplace and kept reading. "You will find the legal documents enclosed. The Whitfield Foundation is protected by a clause, what Adrian calls a living trust within a trust. You are the sole director for life. Not even Nathan can change it without your written consent and a court's approval. Let them chase a signature. The law is already on your side." I pressed the letter to my chest. The paper crinkled softly with my heartbeat. At the bottom, a single line was written in Robert's bold, decisive hand. "They will come for the money. Let them. The law will meet them at the door." I looked up at Tomas. "Did he ever speak of this?" "He did," he replied, placing a small box on the table. "Said that if the day came, you would need proof, not pity." Inside the box was a USB drive engraved with the initials RW. I connected it to the old laptop on the desk. The screen flickered on, and a series of files appeared: videos, signed affidavits, transaction histories, all documenting every decision Robert had made before his death. "Every asset, every clause, every recording," Tomas said quietly. He trusted Adrian with the rest. The light from Castle Hill cut through the window again, falling directly on a framed photograph of Robert on the mantel. His eyes, frozen in that quiet confidence, seemed to meet mine. I whispered, "You didn't build this for me. You built it for the truth." Adrian arrived just before dawn, his overcoat damp with ocean mist. He carried a briefcase and the same calm that had anchored me through Robert's death. He looked around the room, his gaze landing on the open envelope. "So you found it?" "I found more than that," I said. "I found his voice." Adrian gave a faint smile. "Then it's time we used it." He opened his briefcase and spread a set of documents on the table. Legal filings, title transfers, a log of evidence. The paper trail was perfect. "Elle, this was Robert's final architecture," he said. "He built a wall so precise that greed can't find a crack. All we have to do is stand behind it." I looked out the window toward the horizon. The sun was rising, casting gold across the waves. For the first time since Robert's death, the world looked clear. I reached into my pocket, took out the coastal keys, and set them beside the letter. He gave me this the night before the surgery, said it would open the most important thing. I thought he meant the estate. Adrian shook his head. He meant the plan. Outside, gulls cried over the cliffs and the lighthouse beam faded as the morning light took hold. I carefully folded the letter and put it back in its envelope. "If love fails," I whispered, rereading Robert's words, "the law will protect you. It's his final promise." Tomas poured coffee into 2 mugs and handed one to me. The warmth steadied my hands. I looked at the 2 men, the strategic friend and the silent witness, and said, "Then we will fight a clean fight." By mid-morning, the fog had burned off Gullhaven Point. The ocean stretched out in a sheet of silver, still but powerful, the way I needed to be. Adrian had arranged the files on the dining table, each one labeled in his meticulous hand. Beside him was Tomas, still poised, cradling a coffee mug. When the doorbell rang, I knew who it was even before I opened it. Dr. Lila Warren stood there, her hair blowing in the wind, a worn leather satchel slung over her shoulder. She was the headmistress of a Newport public school, a soft-spoken woman who spent her weekends reading on her porch. "Elle," she said with a small smile, "you called and I came." I hadn't called. Adrian had, but Robert must have told him who to contact. Lila stepped inside and glanced around the old house as if she were stepping into a memory. "This place hasn't changed," she said softly. "Robert used to talk about it whenever he visited my school. He said it reminded him of patience, of how the cliffs endure the sea." I blinked, surprised. "He visited your school?" She nodded. "He funded a scholarship program for my students. He said education was the only inheritance that never decays." She set her satchel on the table and pulled out a portfolio. "He also made me part of his foundation, a 12% ownership stake, silent shares. I think he wanted someone outside the family to protect it." Adrian looked up, impressed. "That explains the missing piece of the trust." Dr. Lila Warren smiled, a calm but resolute expression. "He didn't hide it. He placed it where kindness lives quietly." Her words hung in the air like an echo of Robert's own beliefs. I remembered him saying, "Real power hides in plain sight. It just wears the cloak of decency." Judge Harold Pike arrived soon after. A tall man with silver hair and the bearing of a soldier, he carried a sense of authority that filled the room. He was a retired judge and an old friend of Robert's, a man whose handshake once decided fates in a courtroom. He greeted me with respect. "Mrs. Whitfield, Robert often spoke of your strength." "Then he must have spoken in confidence," I replied. He gave a slight smile. "Confidence is the strongest evidence." We all gathered around the table, the sound of the waves outside muted by the shuffle of papers inside. Adrian projected financial charts onto the wall, showing the corporate structure, the trust accounts, and the hidden legacy clause that made me the sole director for life. "This is our foundation," he said, tapping the screen. "Robert ensured this clause overrides any power of attorney or board vote. It's sealed in law under Rhode Island nonprofit statutes. They can argue all they want, but the moment they challenge it publicly, they lose standing." Judge Pike leaned forward. "So when they arrive tomorrow, we make it public. No anger, no argument, just the law." Lila nodded. "And the truth." I looked around the room. The 4 people Robert had trusted in different ways: Adrian, the strategist; Tomas, the silent protector; Judge Pike, the witness to justice; and Lila, the moral partner no one saw coming. For a long moment, I just listened to the hum of the projector, the ocean wind against the windows, the beat of something bigger than revenge forming quietly between us. "They think I'm alone," I said. They think intelligence fades with age and that love makes you blind. But here's what they forgot. Robert and I built this life with patience, and when cornered, patience turns into precision. Adrian smiled. Then precision is what we'll give them. Tomas raised his coffee mug slightly in a toast. To a clean fight. We spent the next few hours rehearsing every move. The legal briefs were ready. The witness statements were signed. The Providence Boston Press was anonymously tipped off, just enough to ensure the cameras would arrive at the right moment. As the afternoon faded into gold, I stood by the window overlooking the cliffs. The lighthouse blinked again, slow and sure, as the waves crashed below like a purposeful drumbeat. Robert never built an empire alone, I said softly. He built it with good people hidden in plain sight. Behind me, Lila answered, and now those good people are ready. The room fell silent. For the first time since my husband's death, I felt a strength that wasn't borrowed from the past, but was rising from it. Tomorrow they would come to claim what they thought was theirs, and when they did, the light, the law, and the truth would be waiting. The next morning broke sharp and clear, the sea as calm as glass. I was awake before dawn, the air at Gullhaven Point thick with salt and inevitability. The table from the night before still held every document in its order. Adrian's carefully arranged stacks, Judge Pike's notes, Lila's foundation files. The lighthouse beacon outside flashed once against the pale horizon, sweeping across the window panes like a reminder. Be steady. By 8:30 a.m., I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Nathan's black SUV appeared first, followed by Caroline's sleek sedan. Even from the window I could see their confidence. He adjusted his tie, she her sunglasses, as if this were just another photo opportunity. I waited until they reached the steps before I opened the front door. "You're early," I said. Nathan smirked. "Didn't want to give you time to prepare." Behind him, Caroline's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "We thought we'd save you the embarrassment. It's time to settle the estate properly." Her gaze swept the porch, taking in the open door, the calm I refused to hide. "You shouldn't have come alone," she added. "Who said I was alone?" From the foyer, Adrian stepped forward, Judge Pike at his side. Lila followed, her leather satchel in hand. For the first time, Caroline's expression shifted, her charm flickering. Nathan frowned. "What is this? A performance?" Adrian's voice was calm. "No, Mr. Whitfield. This is a will reading, one you seem to have missed." We moved into the living room. Morning light flooded the space, and for a moment it all felt staged. The betrayers on one side, the truth-bearers on the other. Caroline perched on the edge of the sofa, legs crossed, feigning composure. Nathan pointed a finger at me. "You've turned this into a circus. We came for the company records and the property transfer. Don't make this ugly." Adrian opened his briefcase and placed a single document on the table. "Robert Whitfield's supplemental clause. It overrides all other provisions." Caroline leaned forward. "You can't just create a clause after he's dead." Judge Pike adjusted his glasses. "No one created anything. I notarized this document in 2020. Your father-in-law was a very thorough man." Adrian continued, reading aloud in a steady voice. "In the event of the survival of my wife, Eleanor Whitfield, she shall remain sole director and beneficiary of all assets, stocks, and properties of the Whitfield Mariners Foundation. She cannot be removed, replaced, or overruled unless declared legally deceased." A silence fell. The words hung in the air, heavier than stone. Nathan blinked. "What does that mean?" I met his gaze. "It means you can't take what isn't yours." Caroline shot to her feet. "We'll see about that. I have lawyers." "You'll need better ones," Adrian said mildly. "Robert filed the trust under Rhode Island's highest protective tier. Your husband's claim is based on inheritance law. This is foundation law. They don't overlap." The blood drained from Nathan's face. "You're lying." Judge Pike tapped the notary seal on the final page. "I assure you, no one in this room is lying under oath. Not anymore." Caroline's confidence fractured. Her voice went high, shrill.
You think this will stop us? The board? The press? They'll hear my side. Dr. Lila Warren spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet but sharp. They already have. The foundation is a matter of public record, and as silent co-owner, I've ensured full transparency. Every misused fund, every transaction, every attempt to seize control, it's all documented. Caroline spun around, stunned. You? Lila nodded. 12% may not seem like much, but when it represents the truth, it carries more weight than greed. Nathan rubbed his forehead, his anger slowly giving way to disbelief. He planned this. He saw this coming. Yes, I said softly.
He saw everything. He looked at me then, really looked at me. His eyes were the same color as Robert's, but hollowed out by years of comparison. You played us. No, I said. I warned you. Outside, the waves echoed against the cliffs, steady and sure. Caroline's voice trembled. This isn't fair. Fair, I said, is not something you get to demand after you've destroyed it. Nathan sank into his chair, speechless. Caroline's anger twisted into something desperate. We'll go to the media. Adrian gestured to the window. Then you should smile. They're already here. Through the glass, I could see reporters gathering near the gates, cameras ready. The story had already started, and this time, the truth would be writing the headlines. Caroline's face went white. Nathan's hands were shaking as he whispered, You can't outrun the law, Mother, and you can't bury the truth. I stepped forward, calm and steady. No, Nathan, but you can learn from it. For a long moment, no one moved. The sea filled the silence, and the sweep of the Castle Hill light flashed once more through the glass. They had come to take everything. Instead, they had come face to face with the legacy that would outlast them all. The storm broke before noon, not in the sky, but on the lawn of Gullhaven Point. Reporters crowded the gates, microphones raised, lenses glinting in the gray light. The story had traveled faster than any of us expected. Whitfield heir challenges mother over $59 portfolio. The kind of scandal greed always writes easily. Inside, I stood by the window while Adrian briefed Judge Pike and Lila arranged the evidence binders. Tomas moved silently through the house, offering coffee like a soldier before battle. Outside, Nathan and Caroline argued in low, sharp tones. She wanted to leave. He wanted to fight. Neither of them realized the fight was already lost. When the gates opened, they walked through, flanked by a few reporters who had bribed their way past security. Caroline's was the first voice to ring out. Everyone deserves to know the truth, she said, playing her part for the cameras. My husband and I just want what's fair. Adrian nodded at me once. It's time. I stepped out onto the porch. Then let's show them what fair is. My voice carried clearly on the wind. The cameras swiveled to me. I could see their faces tighten, the story they thought they knew beginning to shift. Adrian moved up beside me, holding a file. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield has agreed to full transparency. We will be sharing official documents and recorded statements from the late Mr. Robert Whitfield. The truth will speak for itself. Caroline laughed nervously. You're bluffing. He didn't record anything. Adrian hit play on a tablet. Robert's voice filled the air, steady and unmistakable. A legacy is not for those who demand it. It is for those who are worthy. The foundation will only survive under the protection of integrity. Elle, if this reaches you, let the light guide you to justice. The crowd went silent. Caroline's expression shattered. Nathan took a step back, his face ashen. Adrian turned a page. We also have the recordings from the night Mrs. Whitfield was pressured to sign over her rights. On those tapes, she states clearly, I fully understand and I refuse. That phrase, by state evidentiary standards, demonstrates full mental competence. Any claim of incapacity is null and void. A gasp went through the reporters. The microphones shifted. Caroline's composure finally broke. You recorded us? She hissed. Lila stepped forward. No, you recorded yourselves. You just didn't realize whose system you were using. She held up a printed email, Caroline's own message, requesting access to the Foundation's digital network, the same one Robert had secured years ago. Every recording they thought they controlled now belonged to the estate. Caroline turned on Nathan, panic rising. "Say something!" But Nathan was staring at the ground. "She told us this would happen," he mumbled. "She told us to stop." I looked at him, not with triumph, but with quiet finality. "Your father built the law into love, Nathan. You tried to rewrite them both." Judge Pike stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "As of this moment, the Whitfield Mariners Foundation remains under the sole direction of Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, per legal verification and witness confirmation. Any further attempts to seize control will be prosecuted as fraud." Caroline's confidence collapsed completely. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. "You can't do this." I turned to her. "You already did it to yourself." The press captured every word, every frozen expression. Cameras clicked like thunder. Lila handed Judge Pike the final file, confirming her 12% silent stake in the foundation. "The people Robert helped will continue to be helped. His work isn't over. It's beginning again." I stepped closer to the microphones, facing every camera with calm. "You all came here for a scandal. But what you're witnessing is a legacy. My husband didn't leave me a fortune. He left me the truth. And today, that truth stands behind me." The lighthouse beam flashed through the salt mist. The reporters kept rolling, hungry for every frame, every soundbite of justice being served. Caroline turned and fled, but the crowd swarmed her. Nathan didn't follow. He just stared at me, broken, as if finally seeing what his greed had made him. Adrian closed the file with a soft click. "It's done," he said quietly. I nodded once. The storm had passed. When the last reporter had cleared the driveway, the silence filled the house like a long-held breath. The smell of salt mist lingered through the open windows, carrying the taste of the sea and relief. I stood by the fireplace, staring up at Robert's portrait. For the first time since he died, I felt him truly here, his mind still protecting, his love still guiding. Nathan sat on the sofa, his tie loosened, his eyes red. The arrogance that had filled his every word was gone, replaced by something quieter, human. Caroline was gone, escorted out by security as she tried to delete files from her phone. Now it was just him and me. He didn't look up when he spoke. "I ruined everything, didn't I, Mother?" I walked over, the floorboards creaking softly under my feet. "You didn't ruin it, Nathan. You exposed it." He shook his head. "I wanted to be like him, respected. But every time I tried, I found myself standing in his shadow. And when he gave it all to you," his voice broke, "I thought he never believed in me." I sat down beside him. The firelight flickered on his face, revealing the boy I once knew beneath the man I hardly recognized. "He believed in you more than anyone. He just knew that love without discipline becomes destruction." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Mom. For the lies, for letting her twist everything." "I know," I said softly. "And that's why you're still my son." He dropped his head into his hands. "What happens now?" "Now?" I said. "You learn from the wreckage." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the steady crackle of the fire. Adrian came in quietly, placing a final folder on the table. "Everything is filed and sealed," he said. "The foundation is secure. Caroline is facing multiple fraud charges. The board knows the truth." "Thank you, Adrian," I replied. "Robert would be proud." He gave a small smile. "So am I." Then he turned to Nathan. "You have a chance to start over, son. Don't waste it." Nathan nodded weakly. When Adrian had gone, he stared into the fire again. "Dad always said, 'Money changes people.' I thought he meant other people. Turns out he meant anyone who forgets where value comes from." I said, "It doesn't come from the numbers, Nathan. It comes from how you hold yourself when the numbers are gone." Tears welled in his eyes, but this time he didn't hide them. "I don't deserve forgiveness."
Forgiveness isn't something you deserve, I said gently. It's something you choose. He looked up, the fire reflected in his eyes. You're choosing it now. I'm choosing peace, I replied. But peace has terms. You will repay what you took from the foundation. You will meet with the investigators, and you will learn what your father built, not just what he left behind. He gave a silent, resolute nod. For the first time in months, I felt no anger, just understanding, the kind that grows when pain has run its course and left truth behind. As I poured 2 cups of tea, I noticed how still the sea was. The Castle Hill light blinked in the distance, slow and rhythmic. I handed a cup to Nathan. Your father didn't plan your destruction, Nathan. You did that yourself, but you can still rebuild. He took the cup with trembling hands. I'll try, Mom. That's all any of us can do, I said. The fire settled. The room grew quiet. Somewhere over the cliffs, a foghorn sounded its long, low note into the fading light. For the first time since Robert died, the sound didn't hurt. It healed. When Nathan finally left, I stood at the window watching his car disappear down the gravel drive. I whispered, "Goodbye, son. Come back when you found yourself." The air smelled of ocean and forgiveness. I looked at Robert's portrait one more time and smiled. Justice is served, my love, and mercy is learning to let go. It took a year to realize silence had the sound of peace. The Whitfield Mariners Foundation was thriving again. New programs, new students, new lives rebuilt in Robert's name. The noise of the scandal had faded, replaced by the quiet rhythm of purpose. Each morning, I drove to the Foundation's Newport Annex. We'd opened a Boston outreach hub, too, greeted by kids holding scholarship letters, and families who found hope where there had been none. Every signature I placed on a check felt like an echo of his hand guiding mine. Nathan worked with us now, quietly, without pride. He managed community logistics, a humble, honest job. He rarely spoke of the past, and I didn't ask him to. Some lessons don't need repeating to be remembered. In the evenings, I returned to Gullhaven Point. The house stood firm against the cliffs, its windows open to the sea breeze. The air smelled of salt and rain, the scent of survival. On Robert's desk, I kept the letter he'd written me, the paper worn at the edges from how often I opened it. That evening, I lit the fire and took my tea out to the porch. The Castle Hill light blinked on the dark horizon, its beams sweeping across the waves in long, deliberate arcs. Somewhere in that light, I felt him. I turned on the small speaker Tomas had repaired, a relic Robert used to check his recordings. It crackled for a second. Then his voice came through, calm and warm. Legacy isn't about bloodlines. It's about direction. The light that guides the way even after we're gone. I closed my eyes. His words wrapped around the wind like a prayer. The man who built empires was still teaching me how to build peace. You were right, my love, I whispered. The tide has turned. Out over the cliffs, the waves broke against the rocks with a slow, steady, and certain rhythm. The sound no longer reminded me of an ending. It reminded me of endurance. Inside, the house glowed softly in the reflection of the sea. Robert's portrait caught the last sweep of the lighthouse beam before it faded to make way for the dawn. He left me $59,000 in stock, but the real inheritance was far greater. Courage disguised as calm, justice cloaked in grace, and a belief in the quiet power of doing the right thing, no matter how long it took the world to notice. I raised my Gullhaven-etched teacup to the sea. You left me a lighthouse, not a fortune, I said. The wind carried my words as if returning them to him. Then, as if on cue, the beacon swept across the cliffs one more time, steady, constant, eternal. And in that light, finally, I let him rest.